This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
It's like CSI meets the Book of Revelation. That's the elevator pitch. Watch this.
Hey everybody, this is David Heavener, and I'm so proud to announce the release of my new TV series, The Last Evangelist.
Hello, friends. Dr. Amy Adams here to tell you about the T1774.
We've got an unregistered church.
Apprehended a total of 13 for cooperating. And most...
Any other weapons?
Just a Bible.
Lord, it's okay to do whatever they say.
Open fire!
Who are you?
I think you had a reaction to your second vaccine, John.
And everyone's taking
I mean, the conspiracy theorists refuse. Providing support material to terrorists.
We were just handing out Bible.
This is an illegal translation, too.
It's the word of God.
More like the voice of hate speech. This is your third strike. They're going to be going away for a very long time. No one will hire them. They can't buy food, clothing, medicine, nothing.
Not me you're after. It's the children you crave. And you want them forever. That's why you want me dead in the grave. You nailed me to this cross. Soon my breath will end.
Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining me tonight is a gentleman who's got long experience with video, film production, television production, writer, producer, actor, also a gifted musician, and a blood-bought believer in Jesus Christ, and he's now putting those talents to work for the kingdom. He is the creator, the writer, and star of the Last Evangelist TV series. We are honored to welcome back to the program David Heavener. David, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join us tonight.
Hey, Derek, it's so good to be here, especially with a like-minded brother like you. Or should I say, with someone who's as crazy as I am?
Yeah, I think that's about right. Sharon and I have been watching this development as you've been working on this for the last couple of years, and we probably consume a lot of entertainment content when we have time that we don't recommend other Christians watch, just so that we can watch the programming coming out of Hollywood for our kids and our grandkids. Occasionally, we can recommend something that, whether deliberately or inadvertently, has a good message to it. But you're taking your long experience in Hollywood making action films and putting it to use to tell a different story. What is The Last Evangelist about?
Yeah, basically, Derek, it's I call it CSI meets the Book of Revelation. It's where Scripture ties to current events. Jesus talked about that in Matthew 24. It kind of brings it to life. It makes it relevant. I play a cop. I'm an FBI guy. I work for the anti-interrogation unit, terrorism unit. And my job is to bust underground churches. Now, these churches are underground because, well, they're not registered with the government. Because in this day of Last Evangelist, which is actually today, churches have to be registered. They need to know, well, what they say, you need to be registered because of a virus that's broken out. So they need to control this disease. But really, they need to know what you're saying, and they need to monitor that. Well, these churches don't. They will not yield and adhere to the government laws, so they go underground. So I bust these churches until I go blind one night after an experience of an arrest, and something happened. God speaks to me, and maybe I'll let you play the trailer and people can guess at it.
Well, we opened with that, so we're Looking forward to it. Yeah, well, I jumped right into it. I learned early on that people have attention span in the radio business anyway. They used to drill into our heads that people will listen to you for about 10 seconds, and so you got to grab them right off the bat. And that we open the program with that. But this has a similar plot line to what we read about the Apostle Paul, who was out there. So what? How much inspiration did you draw from his life in the book of Acts?
Well, you know what? I believe God gave me the script. I believe God wrote the script actually through me. I woke up 3 o'clock one morning in an attic, sleeping in an attic about 5 years ago. And so God downloaded this. And I believe what God is saying is today is much, it connects with the scripture today connects with humanity as much as it was written from humanity by God during that time. So my life coincides the life of Paul because, well, why not? I arrest and persecute Christians. So did Paul. I have a hatred toward these Christians. So did Paul. And I want to throw them all in jail. So did Paul. Well, but you see, God knew my heart. I'm talking about my character, John Rhodes. Mm-hmm. There was something about me that really had a love for God, to seek the truth about God. And God knew that. So that's why he touched me. I went blind. I woke up, and all of a sudden, Derek, I started seeing things that I didn't see before. Kind of like, remember the old movie, They Live?
Yes, that's one of our favorites. In fact, one of the highlights of my life was tweeting something about They Live and Roddy Piper actually giving it a like, I was a WWF fanboy back in the day. So.
Oh, okay. Well, Roddy did, my movie was the last movie he ever did, Legion, the Final Exorcism.
Wow.
I starred in that with him, directed. And we talked a lot about They Live. But I made reference to that because he wears these sunglasses. Mm-hmm. He puts them on and he sees people for who they are. He sees the world for what it is. Well, when John Rhodes, when God lifts the blindness off of John Rhodes' eyes, he can see things for what they are. He saw the same thing he's always seen, but this time he sees them for what they really are. The vaccine, the virus, that's the pandemic, this insertion they're giving everybody. He starts questioning things. He starts looking at the government. He starts seeing how people are being gaslighted by these government laws. And so that's why I think it's so important for people to see shows like The Last Evangelist, to see what I believe what happened in the Bible is going to happen today to us. God's going to make us go blind, and then we wake up, we're going to see things in the spirit world like we've never seen before.
History does repeat itself. We're going to Turkey this fall, and one of the sites we'll see is an underground city that was built that dates to the 1st and 2nd century when the Christians there were hiding from the Romans. There's another one that's been found in southeast Turkey just within the last few weeks that they're estimating may have held as many as 70,000 people. Hard to imagine that this was going on 2,000 years ago in a world that was lit only by fire, but we may be returning to those days. How difficult was it to put yourself in that mindset where people who refuse to go along with the government line are suddenly cut out of the economy?
Well, because I am an actor, I've been doing this for many years. So it was. I'm not going to say it was easy. It's never easy. But I'll tell you what was hard. When I got into this role and started doing it, it really affected me because the things I was saying is so real. I said things like, when are these people going to learn? Talking about the government. You push these people, meaning these Christians, too far, they're going to fight back. That was one of my lines. I'm going, well, that's true. That's what's going to happen. There's going to be a pushback. Things about you can't buy or sell or get a job unless you take this insertion. And I had this conversation. You haven't seen that scene yet, but that affected me. As I was doing it, I'm thinking, Lord, this is really coming true. People don't understand. It's happening now in the spirit world. It's going to manifest in the flesh very, very shortly.
When you're writing, you have to put yourself in the mind of the worldview, the point of view of characters who don't always share a worldview that you now have. John Rhodes, especially in the beginning, is obviously doing his job, working for the government and persecuting, as the Apostle Paul was back in the day. It can be a little bit difficult when you're writing characters who you want to connect with the audience. Now, obviously, he's got a change of heart there, but you've got character like Rhodes who the audience, presumably Christian, or let's say Christians who view this up front, are not going to see him as a good guy because he's persecuting others who share our worldview. How difficult is that to write a character who's representing the wrong side, but still make him relatable, likable, a good guy, somebody who connects with the audience?
You know, it's a really good question, Derek, and I'll answer it this way. At the end of the day, John Rhodes wants to stand for truth, and he's standing for the truth that he knows at that time. And that's how I had to approach this character. I had to say to myself, look, this is all you know. All you know is what the government tells you. They tell you these people are bad. They tell you that it's wrong what they're doing. So I had to approach it that way. That's the truth in the lie. It's called trying to find the truth in the lie. And that's why it was easier for me to play that, because I was still searching for the truth. But I'm also tired. I'm a cop I've arrested so many of these people, and I haven't seen any good come out of it, and it's grieved my soul subconsciously. So I'm pretty tired when I make this last arrest that you see. And then the family with John Rhodes, and you'll see this in future episodes, he had a family. He cherishes the family, which he lost. And so when he sees this man barricaded in the back with his two kids, it affects him. He sees a human being trying to stand up for what he believes is truth, you see. And you saw that part. Mm-hmm. And so, the answer is, even a bad guy, it's easier to play a bad guy if you can, in the bad guy, find the truth of what his world, what's true in his world.
Mm-hmm. And that makes him a more compelling character. I know Sharon I've talked with her about this too. She's a really gifted writer, and writing villains can be a real challenge, but also very rewarding if you can find a way to make a villain villainous and yet still resonate with the audience, because they see, as you say, that he's living according to the truth that he understands. And in the internal movie that's playing inside his head, he's the hero of the story. So where does the hero of this story take the viewer? What is the journey that John Rhodes goes on, and how do you hope that this connects with and changes the viewer?
Well, I think number one, it doesn't smell like religion. A lot of quote, and this is not a Christian film. I happen to be a Christian writing and portraying current events that deals with believers, modern day believers, and what Jesus said is going to happen to us in Matthew 24. But the problem with quote Christian movies is they want to skip over all of the reality of what reality is, and they want to jump right to accept Jesus. The salvation part, life. I mean, we all wish it could be that way, right? We wish that. But it's not that way, and it's not that way with this guy, John Rhodes. He's discovering things. Remember, God's opening his eyes, and he's seeing them for the first time. So when you see something for the first time, you don't just run to it. You question it. You process it, and that's what he's doing. But the one thing he's trained to do in his line of work is always put together the evidence and connect the dots, and to move toward the light. And that's what he starts doing. As you watch the show, you'll see. And I hope what people get out of this is they'll look at each other and go, you know what? I see a little bit of me in this guy. He's not your typical. Well, I'm not going to tell you he's a Christian. You'll have to see the next episode to see how this comes about. But he has a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other. And I think this is important, because just because God calls you into a mission field does not mean you're to give up the talents and the track record that God has given you. And I think Christians make this mistake. They want to just drop everything, forget about their old life, and just go and start preaching in the pulpit, which is what I did. It was a mistake. Now, when I say give up your old life, if you were a pimp or a drug dealer, give it up. But if God has you as a filmmaker and actor, and you become a Christian, doesn't mean you have to give that up. It means you're to use that and take it as a tool to help others.
How difficult was that for you to make that transition? And what was the process you went through going from producing, directing, writing, starring in action films to working on getting this out and trying to create a distribution channel for it?
Yeah. Well, probably everything a person could do wrong, I did it. Okay. I could write the book on what not to do. First of all, when I got into the ministry, I quit acting. I dropped all of that world. I went straight to the pulpit, Derek, and started preaching. I was ordained as a Methodist minister, okay, if you could believe that, until they got so liberal that I had to walk away from that. Then I went into the North American Mission Board, so I was a Baptist pastor, until God spoke to me one day. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm building my church." He goes, "Yeah, you're building your church. You're not building my church." And so I said, "What do you want, Lord?" He said, "Go back to what I created. You know how to make movies. You write. You do that, So that's when I realized I had to go back to what it is, the purpose in which God created me, my talents. So the answer to your question is that when a person has a gift that God has given them, such as he's given me, don't abandon that. Match that with the ministry God's given you. And so here I am with Last Evangelist 4.5 years ago. Didn't know anybody, didn't know you all, didn't know the world of prophecy, nothing, didn't know any of that. But through a chain of events, God has led me to where we are now. And you've seen, Derek, I think I've stayed pretty close with you through these years, and I think you've seen the things God has done that's kind of crazy, supernatural, crazy. So there is no distribution chain for a show like this, because even though I make a lot of deals with Netflix and HBO and all these, they're not going to buy this unless I take the details of God out of it. I can mention God, but don't get into Jesus, and certainly don't get into what the truth is. So I had to create my own. So coming from a distribution background, I formed davidheavener.tv, which is Roku, Amazon, Apple TV. We're on Spotify. We're on iTunes and iHeartRadio. And so we basically have our own in-house channel. Now, there'll come a day where I will work out a deal with someone like a Netflix, but it'll be hopefully on our terms, not theirs. So it's not an easy task. It's very difficult. But if God's with you, then who can be against you?
Amen.
Yeah.
You've done a number of other projects here. You've got a couple of books out. We'll talk about those over the next half hour or so. But End Times Investigations, a series of interviews that you put up through davidheavener.tv, which will add to one of the books, by the way. What did you learn through those interviews, and how has that influenced The Last Evangelist?
Oh, my goodness. I've had the pleasure of interviewing what I would consider some of the most top-notch gifted men and women in the world of prophecy, you being one of them.
Well,
okay. Yeah. And 50% of the interviews that you see, 35% I don't release because the content is too sensitive. It's too in-depth. It's too, I have learned so much, and I'll say this humbly with pride, that I have more knowledge than any seminary student who has a master's. It doesn't matter. I have learned more in the past 3.5 years than going to any Christian college, because I learned it directly from the men who had really researched these topics. What are they? The alien-demon connection, program multiples, astral projection, And these are the outskirts, as you know, of Christianity. The things you talk about, and you get into the myths and the ancient world, and you tie that to scripture, and I've done interviews with you. So the answer is, when I did all these interviews, I put them together into David Heavener Investigates, and we ran as a series on television. Somebody saw it. They sent it to Tom, Tom Horn. At that time, Tom knew me because I did a Josh Peck show called Silent Cry.
Right.
And so Tom came to me and said, listen, he goes, would you, because I had this book, True Power, that I'd already written. But he said, would you please write a book based on your life, but based on the things that you talked about? And that's how that David Heavener End Times Investigations came about.
And how does that served as grist for the mill for The Last Evangelist?
Because this is just everything in this that we talk about is in one of the episodes of The Last Evangelist. It deals with this. And Derek, I got to tell you, I don't know of any show that deals with program multiples, deals with astral projection, deals with things like that without making it a silly Hollywood supernatural thriller. I mean, they deal with stuff like that, but I'm talking about from a spiritual point of view standpoint. So that's how all this is going to feed into Last Evangelist.
So you get to a point where you've been fed through these interviews, and I'm saying this because I started doing this podcast in 2009, so I know exactly what you're talking about. You interview the guys who really know what they're talking about, and you start making connections. At what point did you feel like you were prepared to begin writing the script for The Last Evangelist?
Well, it's funny because I asked God, why'd you choose me? I mean, there's much better qualified people out there than me. I'm dyslexic, I got all kinds of issues, but just about everything that I interviewed someone on, I could relate to. For instance, I talked to L.A. Marzulli many times, many interviews, and we talked about abduction. Well, if you read my book, I had an abduction experience, which I never talked about. I knew about it. My family knew about it. My cousin knew about it. I put it in the book. Program multiples, I dealt with them in Hollywood. Okay, just didn't have a label for them. I didn't have anything, but I knew what it was, right? Astral projection, been there, done that. Almost everything now, feeding the dead, I haven't done that. That's something that you and I have done. I haven't run any tubes in the ground yet.
Yeah.
But however, my cousin, who is now hospitalized, been most of his life, diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, he was grave soaking back when he was 14, 15, 16. I didn't know what it was, but he did. He would lay on the graves. Matter of fact, I had many friends that would go, our high school was right next to a graveyard, and they would lay on graves every night, just sit there. And of course, they'd be smoking dope, getting high. And I'm not sure if they were joking or whatever. They'd feel like they were conjuring these spirits up in there. Well, this stuff is real, man. You start messing with this, you'll find out this is nothing to play with. So everything I interviewed just about, I experienced in life. So that's why I think I could take that and write about it and put it in a script and a book.
Hollywood has been a place of high weirdness and evil for a long, long time. Sharon had just stumbled onto a story, documentary about a woman back in the 1930s who at the age of 15 was taken to what she thought was a casting call, and it turned out it was, but not in the way she thought. She wound up being sexually assaulted. There are other stories like Fatty Arbuckle, who was a very famous comic back in the early days of Hollywood, lost his career because a woman died, and there's still questions about what exactly had happened. But clearly, it was the kind of party that you wouldn't want your daughter going to. What did you sense and feel when you were there and working and active, and how did you rationalize it, put up with it, tolerate it as long as you did?
Well, first of all, when I went into Hollywood, I was a brain dead Christian. I wanted to to make movies. Not right when I went into Hollywood. I went in there to pitch my songs, but eventually I started making movies, and I wanted to make movies. But what this does, Derek, a little bit of success feeds the ego. The ego starts to enlarge. It demands more success because it gets hungry. The more it tastes a little bit of success, and then it wants more. So you start compromising in order to get fed, to feed that ego. And then once you get to a certain level, where I was in the 90s of kind of like, I was like top of the mountain of indie films, right? Where I could pretty much go into a room and ask for something and I would get it. So, well, people stop saying no to you. They're always saying yes. So I lost reality. I lost connection with reality. And I remember going on the set. I was making my 7th HBO film, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and I had bought me a couple of bottles of wine. I usually had them after I got off from shooting, but I remember that day I cracked it open at 10 o'clock that morning, and I drank a half a bottle, and I said, this is okay. It's not going to hurt me. Next day, half bottle. 2 weeks later, I got a bottle in me by the time it's, noon, right? Well, the problem with this was a heavy stunt movie. It was called Fugitive X. I mean, I did some heavy, heavy stunts, and I had a stunt double, right? And some things happened where my stunt double actually became a complete quadriplegic, not because of me, but because of the fact that I wasn't running my set the way I should run my set. Because remember, I was writing, directing, producing. Mm-hmm. Now, he didn't get hurt because of my negligence, so I don't want to lay that on me. But what I will lay on me is that, and my question always was, if I would have run my set the way that I should have, would things gone a little different? Probably not, but you always ask yourself that question. Well, that gave me a wake-up call. And so when that happened, I basically left Hollywood after that happened. I was close to him. He was my stunt double. He looked pretty much like me, and he would do all the fight scenes and so forth. So what happens is you get into Hollywood, and because it's a demonic portal, meaning that when demons operate on a continual basis, it becomes a portal. I think you and I mean, we've talked about things like that. So Hollywood is such a portal where the demons of self-gratification, of addiction, feeding the ego, they operate there. So when you get caught up in that, it's so strong, and it sucks you in. I remember walking down in Westwood, looking at people through in a restaurant. I was making millions, and I was making movies, right? And I was, had success and all that. But I looked at them and I said, I wish I had that. I'm lonely. I was broken. I was lost. And so that's what happened to me. I didn't handle it the way I should have. Okay. So I pulled out of Hollywood for about 4 years. I regrouped. I went back in with a different frame of mind, Derek. Now, it wasn't the frame of mind I should have had. It wasn't a God first frame of mind. It was, I'm going to make sure I don't let that happen to me again frame of mind. So I was able to sustain, and that's when I made some more films. And then after that is when God dealt with me, took me to my knees, and that's how I ended up where I am right now.
Long process then to getting to the point where you felt comfortable or felt led to go back and using the skills that you developed in Hollywood, but for a different purpose this time. How long was that process? How long were you, did you think that you were supposed to be a pastor in the pulpit?
Yeah, so it was about 4 to 5 years, from the time God called me out into the ministry to the time that I picked up my tools of the trade, which is filmmaking, started using them. It was about a 5-year period. And I wish that it would have been shorter, but I had to learn. See, look, Derek, here's the problem, and this we're all guilty of it, is when God calls us to do something, we have a habit of wanting to do it like everybody else, instead of being unique and walking the road that God lays out for us. So I thought, well, hey, I'm supposed to be a pastor. I'm supposed to be, I don't know, maybe on TV preaching. I don't know. No, that's not what God wanted. He wanted me to continue making these films and doing it the way I'm doing it now.
So what is the main challenge that the challenges that you've had to overcome? Obviously, you've had to do this a different way than you were doing it in Hollywood. First of all, you're not in Hollywood anymore. You're in southern Indiana, close to your hometown of Louisville, which is not exactly the nexus of entertainment production, film or video production in the United States. So how have you had to adapt to create The Last Evangelist?
Well, you have to let God do it his way when you're dealing with the budget that we're dealing and you're dealing with the resistance that we're dealing with. You have to let God do it because only God can perform this miracle. I couldn't do it. I wanted to make this TV series 3 years ago. God said, no, it's not time. I wanted to get a check from a studio that was willing to write it. God said, no, don't take that money. He said, go to my people. You'll do it my way. It's very humbling, it's very organic, and it's very grassroots, but it's working. I see God's hand in it. It's difficult, Derek, because when you travel this road, you don't have a lot of friends. You pee a lot of people off. You make the religious system mad because you don't fit into what their concept of Christianity and film, films are. And then you make the world mad. When I say the world, it's not everyone, but it's people that if I'm talking in Last Evangelist about the insertion and about people can't eat or drink or work because if they don't take it, well, there's a vast majority of people out there that call that Q and a conspiracy, and they come against you on that. Okay, and if they dig deeper, they will find that there's more into it than that. And then they start saying, because I know what they're thinking, this guy's looking for truth. This guy could be dangerous. Okay, we don't like that. Okay, so then you got the demons coming after you. So you start getting hit from all sides. The world, who's pretty much brain dead. The religion, okay, who's lukewarm. And then the demons who just want to take you out. So you value your friends, the few that you have. Let me say that.
The production values that you've been able to put into The Last Evangelist, what I've seen so far is really remarkable, given what I imagine you're working with there in southern Indiana. You don't have the talent pool that you have in Hollywood, for example, or even Vancouver or Toronto for that matter. So you're working with some, in fact, I saw some familiar names on the credits. Lisa Haben, Paul Begley showing up on the screen. And yet the editing, the fact that you've got multiple camera angles instead of just, one handheld through many of the shots, better than I think a lot of people are going to expect from an independent production that's being crowdfunded. How are you pulling this off?
Well, I've made so many movies that you learn how to take spit chewing gum and Scotch tape and you put things together, but the key with this film, and I told the guys this, I said, look, we cannot compete with $100 million picture production, but what we can do is we can paint a picture. We can create an atmosphere. That's all I want to do. I want to take the people into a place that could be, but yet they go, wow, this is. It's that they got one step in it, 1 foot in it, and 1 foot out of it, and they're going, oh. And that's really my goal. And so I shot it very handheldish, gritty, but yet I got many different angles, you're right. I had top-of-the-line cameras. I used the latest technology in filming. So there's things you can do when you don't have a lot of money. You can cut the fat off, but you got to know where the fat is, so you don't cut the meat off and take the bones out with it. And so that's kind of what I did. The most important thing for me is to take people into a world they can relate to and that will affect them. And I had one lady at this last screening we did, and she came up with tears in her eyes. She goes, that's going to be us one day, isn't it? And I go, I'm afraid so. I'm afraid it will be, and that's really where I want to go with this.
How prepared is the church, based on your experience now, seeing it from behind the pulpit at a variety of conferences over the years, and also seeing how Hollywood influences the culture at large, which drags the church along with it, whether we realize it or not? How prepared is the church for this reality that you're depicting in The Last Evangelist?
Yeah, so when you say the church, I'm going to kind of make that two categories. You tell me if it makes sense. One is the church system, the buildings, the denominations that meet every Sunday, Wednesday, have their programs. The other one is the true followers of God who may not be in a building. They may be online with us, So two categories. The church system, the buildings, it's pathetic. They have, for the most part, I'm going to say 95% don't have a clue. They're apostate, they're lukewarm, and they're in trouble, okay? I'm hoping Last Evangelist, because I've created the Last Evangelist Bible study, which part of it I put in the conference that we did. I shipped it to you.
Right.
But it has 3 acts, and they watch the show, 3 parts, and each one has a Bible study that goes along with it. So I'm hoping churches will embrace this and bring it into their congregation. The other church is the true believers. They get it. They see it. They go, yes, I know this is happening. And this is, Derek, where we're getting most of our support is from those people, the lone sheeps out there, that are taking care of each other. And so, but the church system is not prepared at all.
So people who want to follow and support The Last Evangelist, where would they go and how can they help you bring this to screens?
Yeah, thank you. If you could go to lastevangelist.com, and there you can donate as little as $25 and have an on-screen thank you. You can donate for DVDs. You can donate. You can get a role in the movie, a walk-on. You can get a production credit. This is how we're funding this. If you want to watch the first episode, go to davidheavener.tv and just sign up. And it's right there. It has its own channel. The thing is, we need to really thank you for your support, Derek. I appreciate it. But we do need to support each other, especially when we do grassroots things like this that are new, that haven't been tried yet. And I appreciate the support. I do.
This is, it looks great on the website. Again, I have only had time to watch the first few minutes. As soon as we're done here tonight, I'm going to watch the rest of episode 1 and then look forward to the future episodes that are coming out. But you do other video work. You talk about Bible studies, other interviews and things. What else are you working on and where do people follow that?
Yeah, they can go to my Monday night live show, 7 p.m. on all the platforms, YouTube, Facebook. I'm on davidheavener.tv. You can catch me. Halfway, we go underground, which you can come in, make phone call in. You can video yourself in. You can talk to the guests. You've been on my show, Derek. And so they can catch me there. And I release standalone videos every once in a while. Not as many as I used to, but I still do. They can catch me there. And and they can also, if they're interested in any of the product, like the books or the T-shirts, the Legalized Jesus hat, this Legalized Jesus hat. There you go. You can text the word chosen to 91999 or go to davidheavener.tv/order, or you can even call 844-806-0006. And that's also a prayer line if you'd like that prayer. So some of your pastoral experience is also being put to use now. Yeah. Well, we do pray for a lot of people. We get a lot of SRA victims, satanic ritual abuse victims. We get ex-human trafficking victims because, I cover human trafficking quite a bit. We do. We get the real broken people. And you know what? I love it, man. I wouldn't ask for anything more. I consider myself a spiritual doctor in an ER unit, because why? Because it makes me so humble and so thankful that when I can pray with somebody, I say, God, you have put me in a place where I can actually help somebody, for real help somebody, not some Sunday school, Sunday morning fabrication, but really help somebody. And I'm so thankful.
Well, David, it's been really interesting. We didn't, to be honest with you, Sharon and I both have had some experience with the world of entertainment. She fronted rock and roll bands for a while and thought she was going to be a rock and roll singer. I was top 40 radio disc jockey who made it to a top 5 market during my career before deciding that this was not a life I wanted to lead. So when we first met you at in one of the Hear the Watchman conferences in Dallas, like, okay, interesting. What do we make of this guy? Not sure, but. As we've seen your work and you develop your find the direction that God was leading you in over the last 5 years, it's really been remarkable. 2 books now, True Power, End Times Investigations, of course, a long body of work in Hollywood, but just as with Sharon's life, my life, we turn around, we look back at the path we've been on and say, some odd turns there, but now I can see why God led me this way. Looks like that's your life to this point has all led to where you are right now.
Absolutely. And you know what? I tell people everyone is someone's last evangelist, okay? And that's really what this is all about. It's all about evangelizing. And even if I don't go on to make episode after episode, but I think I will, I think God's going to let me make at least 20, 30 episodes, it's going to open the door for other people to say, hey, he did this, I can do this. And what does that mean? It means movies that tell the truth about God. What we've abandoned is God's character. God's character has been assassinated. The church doesn't even, I'm talking about the church system, they don't even know God's character. They left it, you talk about Judaism to them and Israel, and they get lost, So my prayer is that people will start understanding God's true character. And the foundation of that is fear God and respect and repent.
David Heavener is the producer, writer, and star of the series Last Evangelist. DavidHeavener.tv, his website, and lastevangelist.com will also get you there. David will be one of the speakers at the upcoming Go Therefore conference in Brookville, Ohio, which is just outside Dayton, July 28th through 30th. We'll be there, Sharon and me, alongside a number of other speakers that you're familiar with. We'll tell you about that in just a few minutes. But David, really excited for this project to come to fruition because, yes, we do need Christian content, and we need Christian content that depicts more of a reality rather than the sanitized reality that we kind of get in a lot of stuff that looks almost like Hallmark Channel Light, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Well, when Gunsmoke came out, because God showed me Gunsmoke when I wrote Last Evangelist, he said, watch this. Well, I didn't understand it, but Gunsmoke was considered one of the first adult Westerns ever made. And even John Wayne came on and gave an introduction at CBS to all the studio heads and said, this is a Western like you've never seen before. And if you go back and you look at the first one, he's standing on Boot Hill looking down over Dodge City saying, this is Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm going to go down and clean it up. And it was a serious issue. He took things very serious. So I consider this like a spiritual Gunsmoke. There's a new marshal in town, and but not hokey. It's a very adult and very serious.
David plays John Rhodes in the series, a modern-day Paul, if you will. Look forward to seeing how this plot and this character develops. David, thanks for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Derek, God bless you and Sharon. I appreciate it. Thank you for all your support.
And you stick around because we're going to tell you how you can join us in Turkey this fall. And, of course, the conference in Ohio. We'll tell you about that as A View from the Bunker continues. Jesus told his followers to love our God with all of our hearts, souls, and minds. And that's what we try to do every week here at Gilbert House Ministries. This program is an outreach of our ministry. Every week, we search through the mysteries of end times prophecy on Unraveling Revelation. We look at the nexus of science and the supernatural on Sci Friday. We study the Bible verse by verse in chronological order at the Gilbert House Fellowship. And each week, I interview fascinating guests on my podcast, A View from the Bunker. Producing that much content takes time. Serving up that much audio and video costs money, and so we depend on your support. You can support us in a couple of ways. First, you can donate through our website at gilberthouse.org, or you can contact us through the U.S. mail. Gilbert House Ministries, P.O. Box 78, Crane, Missouri 65633. And you can shop at our online store, a sort of a virtual book table, where during the month of June, you can save 20% on every one of Sharon's 7 novels in her series of supernatural thrillers, The Red Wing Saga. Just use promo code JUNE20 at checkout. That's June20. We are grateful for your help in fulfilling our mission. We thank you for your prayers and your support. Talking the walk every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net and a whole bunch of other places, including YouTube, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gilbert House. We're also on Roku, Apple TV, and of course our free mobile app available now at VFTB.net. You'll find the link in the top menu bar there. Also at our main website, which is gilberthouse.org. Social media, Twitter, Facebook, you'll find us there at View from Bunker on Twitter, View from the Bunker on Facebook, all the new social media sites, Truth Social, Gab Me, We Get Her, Parlor, all of those places at Derek P. Gilbert. And again, check out our new mobile app, which is absolutely free, gets you access to not just this program, but our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship. That is audio only because you really don't want to see us on Sunday mornings as we're sitting there with our coffee and unkempt, but deep into the Word of God. And of course, our 2 weekly syndicated programs, which are broadcast coast to coast, thanks to the PTL network, a weekly look at End Times Bible Prophecy, Unraveling Revelation, and Sci Friday, which is an analysis of the nexus of science and the supernatural. All of that on our free mobile app, and of course also available on YouTube and at Roku or Apple TV. Just check the link at VFTB.net. This is really a weird week as far as news items go. The war in Ukraine continues to drag on, which is, we've been saying for weeks now, is admittedly the policy of the Biden administration, the elites who control our foreign policy inside the Beltway, the blob, as it's called. Not by me. This is people inside the Beltway. They just refer to that cartel that controls American foreign policy, Council on Foreign Relations, and others. They just refer to it as the blob. They believe that this is the right thing to do, just hamstring Russia by getting them involved in a long, drawn-out war in Ukraine, which is tragic for the people of Ukraine, because they're essentially being sacrificed to weaken Vladimir Putin. At least there are a couple dozen representatives in Congress with a little backbone. A group led by Representative Yvette Harrell of New Mexico, she's a Republican, sent a letter to the Biden White House this past Monday demanding some accountability for the $54 billion that's been allocated for aid to Ukraine. Because while some of it is being sent for economic and humanitarian aid, the bulk of it is going to the weapons industry. And the corporate media, including CNN, which has unabashedly cheered this war in Ukraine, admits we don't know where these weapons are going. We cannot guarantee, and the White House admits they cannot guarantee, the Pentagon, we cannot guarantee this is all getting to the Ukrainians. We don't know for sure that they're using it. Might be ending up on the black market. We're not really sure, but hey, it's worth it because, Russia is evil. So hopefully this isn't just a political stunt on the part of these Republicans, knowing that there will be no accountability. I mean, look, the vote in the Senate was overwhelmingly, like 89-11, in favor of approving the new $40 billion aid package to Ukraine. And I'm not suggesting that we just hang Ukraine out to dry. I, want the people of Ukraine, like everyone else on this planet, deserves to control their own destiny, to self-govern. But when it comes right down to it, I really don't want the children and grandchildren of people that I know being sent over there to fight. And that's ultimately where this is leading. It just feels like a repeat of World War I. We just slowly stumbling our way towards a war with a bunch of interlocking treaties that bind us to defending people when there's really there's no national interest on the part of the United States in going to war for Ukraine. Yes, Putin is not a nice man. Are any of us at that level, any of our elected officials at that level, really, is that really what we're going to base our foreign policy on? I mean, as Christians, I think the one thing we can agree on is that, and I've said this before, the people of Ukraine are suffering, and we should pray that that comes to an end sooner rather than later, one way or another, because the only ones who are coming out of this right now, well, the good old military-industrial complex, the weapons industry. They're making bank on this, and they're doing it because young men are being sent into a meat grinder. One interesting note, sort of connected to this whole thing, another Russian oligarch has died under mysterious circumstances. He's the seventh now since this war began at the end of February. Alexander Subotin, age 43, chief of the gas company Lukoil, which is, of course, connected to the Kremlin. He reportedly sought the advice of two shamans, to cure a hangover. And spirit healers, so-called, Magua Flores and Tina Cordoba inserted toad venom beneath his skin. And local media reports are claiming that Subotin died of a heart attack. Again, age 43. Now, it happens, but they say it happened after he took the herb valerian, which can cause abnormal heart rhythm, but we take valerian here occasionally, and it helps us sleep. So I don't know, just one of those things. If he weren't the seventh one to die in the last, March, April, last 90 days since this war began, the seventh Russian oligarch to die in mysterious circumstances. A couple of these apparently murder-suicides, but who knows? Just an odd thing. Over the last week and a half, the World Economic Forum, which is run by the Bond villain Klaus Schwab. I mean, seriously, he looks like he should be stroking a Persian cat. No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. He hosted the World Economic Forum at Davos, Switzerland last week. Oddly enough, my mother's family emigrated from a region about 10 miles from Davos back in the late 1600s. Wound up in Germany and then wound up in, the part of Ukraine that's being fought over right now. Thankfully, they came over here in around 1894. Anyway, according to the CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourlas, who was addressing the World Economic Forum, they're now putting microchips or planning to microchips in our pills. And he thought this was a really great idea because the microchips would communicate with an app, Bluetooth or something, on your smartphone or tablet, and that would relay this information to presumably a controlling legal authority or medical authority. His words, imagine the compliance. Well, yeah, that's kind of what it's all about. It's about the compliance. So watch for that. And to that end, compliance, that is, the head of Alibaba, the president of Alibaba Group. Now, that's the big Chinese tech company, sort of their equivalent of, Alphabet, Google over there, Jack Ma's company. J. Michael Evans, who's a Canadian, but he met Jack Ma when he was running Goldman Sachs Asia division. So, another oligarch. Anyway, he said that they're developing an app for consumers to measure our own individual carbon footprints. Now, Evans was asked, or he asked himself rhetorically, what does that mean? Where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? An individual carbon footprint tracker, and told attendees at the World Economic Forum to stay tuned because this technology is not yet fully operational, but he expects it to be soon. This is significant. I've interviewed Patrick M. Wood a couple of times on this program. This is going back some years now, 2016, 2017. His book, Technocracy Rising, is highly recommended. If you have not read Technocracy Rising by Patrick Wood, you need to, because it helps make sense of what the World Economic Forum is doing. This is all about technocracy, measuring and then allocating our use of resources, because they believe that bureaucrats, engineers, scientists are the only ones who are qualified to run human civilization. That's what the Great Reset is all about. It is technocracy on steroids. This has been rising since the 1930s, according to Wood in his book. I need to reread it because it's been a few years, and as I age, some of the little gray cells flake off and hit the floor. But what really impressed me about this was that he went through about 80% of the book, documenting in a very thorough manner how this worldview emerged and how it's being manifested in our present day, written before really the last couple of years and before any of us had heard of the Great Reset. His website is technocracy.news. You really should follow that for up-to-date stories on how this worldview is again being brought to fruition in our present day. But the last 20% of the book, Technocracy Rising, is about end times Bible prophecy, because Patrick is a Christian and he sees how this is leading to fulfillment of the prophecies of Daniel and John in the book of Revelation. So it is essentially about bringing us back into a one world government, which is a return to Babel, frankly. They're really not even trying to hide it at the World Economic Forum anymore. Hey, you remember when the Bilderberg Group was the group we were all concerned about? Yeah. Patrick has been researching, by the way, and writing about the Trilateral Commission for many, many years. Yeah, they're sort of not as well known, at least not these days, but they are still very influential in the world. I highly respect the work of Patrick Wood, and again, his website, technocracy.news. Do make that a regular read. And of course, the big story this week, which the mainstream media grapples with whenever something like this happens, is the massacre in Uvalde, Texas, where on Tuesday afternoon, an 18-year-old kid walked into an elementary school, Robb Elementary, with a semi-automatic rifle and shot dead 19 fourth graders and 2 teachers. There are a lot of questions being raised this week, really began to rise on Thursday of this week, as there were people in the community who began to make it known that some period of time elapsed between the arrival of law enforcement and their entry into the school. We saw this before at Parkland in Florida some years back, where law enforcement stayed outside rather than running into the school with an active shooter. I have no law enforcement background, so I cannot speak to what it's like to be in that situation. I have friends and family members who have not spoken with them about this particular case yet, but I think it's safe to say that those of us who've never been in a firefight should probably tread lightly, because we don't actually know how we would respond in that situation. I would like to think that had I been there armed or no, knowing that there were children inside who at the very least needed medical attention, not to mention the ones who might still become a victim if we delayed any further, I would like to think that I would have the courage to rush in with whatever weapons came to hand. But I don't know. I'm thankful I've never been in that situation. I pray I never am. Just obtained my concealed carry permit here, but as we were instructed during our training for this, it is a last resort. You don't get your CCW permit so you can strap on a gun and think you're the baddest dude on the block. It's a tool that you pray you never have to use. And one of the things that struck me during our training session that I thought was really profound and really hit home as I began to think about what had happened in Uvalde the following morning is that the reason they train, this particular company, is because you never know when you or I will confront a demon. And the instructor used those words specifically. And I imagine some of the folks in the class. I expect there was a fair percentage of Christians in the class, but I think at least some of them thought that he was speaking metaphorically. I mean, who would take a gun into a school or a post office, shopping mall, wherever, and open fire, but a monster. And metaphorically, symbolically, you could call that person a demon. But the instructor was speaking literally. As I talked to him about it later, and he made it clear, I thought to me, that at the time that he was speaking literally, that in the moment when your adrenaline starts pumping and the fight or flight reflex has been cranked up to 11, your training is all that will keep you doing what you should do in that situation. And that's why you train. That's why people train with firearms, so that if they're in a situation where they cannot escape, because that was really the first thing they told us in this whole thing during the training session. Don't make rushing in with your gun drawn your first response. Your first response is to put distance between you and whatever is happening. Let law enforcement deal with it until it's clear that there is no option. But there may come a time when you are confronted by a demon and you have no option. And he said, and this demon will be much older and much more experienced in taking human life than you. And so your training may be what stops this entity, because these are people who will only be stopped when they're incapacitated. And again, I expect that at least some in the class thought the instructor was speaking metaphorically. But as I thought about it the next morning, I remembered some conversations, interviews that I've done. So I've been in professional broadcasting since 1980. So I've had the opportunity to talk to a few people. Mine is not a stellar, storied career, but I've talked to a few people, and every now and then there are things that stick with me. Back in 2006 or 7, the Virginia Tech shooting, Cho Sung-hui, the Parkland shooting, there are a number of other mass shootings here in the United States where conspiracy theorists have pointed out that the shooter seemed more proficient with his weapon than he should have been, given his age and level of experience. I looked this up. Police officers under fire will hit their target 15 to 20% of the time. If they're not being fired upon, police officers will hit the target maybe 30 to 35% of the time. There are similar statistics for soldiers in battle. Despite the fact that soldiers, law enforcement officers train with their weapons, in the heat of the moment, when you're needing to use it, again, fight or flight, adrenaline, everything kind of compressing on you, your vision goes tunnel, you don't perform as well as you do when you're calm and on the range. And police departments that collect these statistics find that in the real world, a trained law enforcement officer will hit what he's shooting at or she's shooting at 15 to 30% of the time. So how is it that these kids, 18, 19, 20 years old, with limited experience with their weapons, are so bloody accurate? And it dawned on me as I thought about this Wednesday morning, thinking back to just a few weeks ago in this CCW training course, that this may explain why these kids were able to be so accurate in a real-world situation. They weren't in control. Remember, Nicholas Cruz at Parkland told police officers after his arrest that he'd been hearing a voice inside his head telling him to commit this horrific act. I think he was being truthful. He was written off by the media as a kid who just needs mental help. And that is the analysis of most of the corporate media coverage of this event in Uvalde, Texas, as well. I think as Christians, we need to consider the possibility, since we admit the existence of the supernatural realm, that perhaps there's another explanation for how things like this can happen. The movie Fallen with Denzel Washington, John Goodman, a few years back. I mean, the theology wasn't perfect there, but it illustrated a demon. It was centered on, Washington, who was a police officer who'd captured a serial killer who, as the movie unfolds, you realize it was possessed by a demon who spread from person to person, and even person to animal, and then back to person through touch. And it finally dawns on the police officer that he's dealing with the same entity wearing a multitude of faces, including his captain, his partner, a grandmother that he passes on the street. So, again, the theology of the film is not, it's not biblical, but it's an interesting thought because these entities, demons, in our working theory, based on the writings of the early church and the book of First Enoch from the Second Temple period, spirits of the giants destroyed in the flood of Noah, the Nephilim, if true, and again, this was the understanding of the early church, these things are a lot older than us, and they are a lot more experienced at taking human life. And while we can't prove it, and I recognize that if certain atheist websites get hold of this video clip, they'll likely use it to prove that I am, in fact, a loon. But I think it's at least worth considering that, sadly, for the children of Uvalde at Robb Elementary School this past Tuesday, they encountered a demon. And that young man, Salvador Ramos, is now reaping the consequences of his decisions. Consequences that we should not wish on our worst enemy. This is spiritual warfare that played out in the headlines this past week, but you wouldn't know it from following the corporate media. Got a couple of conferences to tell you about coming up. Of course, the Skywatch TV Defender Conference, the unveiling, still continues for 2.5 months. That runs through August 13th. If you've not taken advantage of it yet, it's a really good deal. Not only do you get 24 presentations, you're getting the 5 documentary films from Skywatch Films, including the 2 award winners, Inhuman, The Next and Final Phase of Man is Here, and Josh Peck's documentary on trafficking, the darker side of trafficking, called Silent Cry. That was a gold medal winner at the Telly Awards last year, 2021. One of only 5 films to be awarded the Gold Telly out of 13,000 entries. So you get access to those 5 films plus the presentations through August 13th, full HD instant access at defenderconference.com. The next big conference coming up, of course, I mentioned that David Heavner will be one of the speakers with us at the Go Therefore conference at the end of July, July 29th through 31st. This is at the Harvest Revival Center, and actually it'll be Friday and Saturday. So if the 31st, I'm going to check the calendar here real quick as I'm speaking. If the 31st is Sunday, we will be on our way home that day. So yes, it is Friday and Saturday, 29th and 30th. So, Harvest Revival Center, Brookville, Ohio, that's outside of Dayton. Besides David Heavner, Sharon, and me, Pastor Mike Spalding, Pastor Carl Gallops, Dr. Michael Lake, Pastor Casper McLeod, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, Kenny C., Tom Dunn, and Neil Peterson. So quite a lineup. It's like the old band getting back together again. Emailed Mike Spalding just today and said we wouldn't miss this one for the world. So do take advantage of that. GoThereforeConference.com is where you register. GoThereforeConference.com. Got a conference coming up in mid-September. Still waiting on information, but it's the weekend of September 15th through 17th outside Sacramento, California. So we'll be back in California for the first time in a little while. We were in San Diego last fall, but it's been since 2019 that we were in Northern California at Sanger. Pastor Greg Crocker and his team there at his church had Troy Anderson, Paul McGuire, and me there. So it'd be nice to get back to Northern California. Watch for more information on that. Again, this is coming up mid-September of 2022. October, we'll be in Turkey. And you can join us visiting the cities of the Churches of Revelation. Göbekli Tepe, what archaeologists call the world's oldest temple. almost 10,000 years old. But we're also going to Sanliurfa, which is nearby. This is close to Abraham's hometown of Haran. There are some who think it might be Ur-Kasdim, Ur of the Chaldees. I do believe Abraham came from northern Mesopotamia and not Sumer, but they do have artifacts there at the Archaeology Museum in Sanliurfa from Karahan Tepe. Karahan Tepe is even older than Göbekli Tepe. So this is going to be a fascinating tour and much, much more. There's a sample itinerary online if you want to check it out, see if this is something you'd be interested in doing. We'll also go to Antakya, called today, where Christians were first called by that name. So a fascinating tour that is historically and prophetically significant. We'll be preaching and teaching all along the way, and joined by Doug Hershey, who was a guest on this program just a few weeks back to talk about this tour. If you missed that, go back and check it in the archives, the app, Roku channel, or on YouTube, youtube.com/Gilbert House. Added some video from some of these locations, including the Gates of Hell. We are literally on this tour visiting the Gates of Hell. And for more information and to reserve your spot, skywatchinturkey.com, skywatchinturkey.com. And next spring, we'll be back in Israel, as Sharon and I, along with Ali Henson and Donna Howell from the Simply His program from Skywatch TV, and Rabbi Zev Porat from Tel Aviv joining us. We just saw Aaron Lipkin at the Prophecy Watchers Conference in Colorado Springs. Looking forward to this one. Joshua's Altar, Bethel, Gilgal, Rephaim, and the Serpent Mound of Bashan, as well as Jerusalem, including the Temple Mount, Masada, Nazareth, Capernaum, and that city's even more interesting than I realized as doing some research for a forthcoming book called The Gates of Hell. We'll be talking about that on the tour. The dates, March 19th through 30th of 2023, with an optional 3-day extension to Jordan, where we'll visit what's the name of the city? Madaba, home of the famed Madaba map, a Byzantine-era map that's made as a mosaic on the floor of a church. Fascinating stuff. The Red Desert of Wadi Rum, and of course, Petra. Oh yeah, in Mount Nebo, you get your look at what Moses saw when he was shown his one look at the Holy Land. All of that, and you'll find the information at skywatchinisrael.com, skywatchinisrael.com. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen to this podcast or vidcast, wherever you are consuming it, whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. Appreciate if you give us a review, a thumbs up, wherever you're watching or listening. Our announcer is DC Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries and released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.